This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the bottom feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this Best of Bob Lowry, I talked to Bob Lowry about different startup methods. We're going to cover those for you here. And then in a second part, kind of a follow-up part, I'm going to talk to him about different problems you will have when you're starting up a pool. So here's Bob Lowry on different startup methods. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. So I'm joined today by Bob Lowry, and he is the premier chemistry expert in the pool industry. And how are you doing today, Bob?
Doing great.
And so just give a brief 1-minute summary of your history in the pool industry for the listeners.
Okay, well, I've been in the pool industry for 48 years. I am a chemist. I have owned 2 chemical companies and a publishing company. I've written 21 books on pool chemistry. I have given about 500 seminars. I was a CPO instructor for 21 years and probably certified 2,000 or more service techs to be CPOs. I started the Pool Chemistry Training Institute about 2.5 years ago, and we certify people in residential pool chemistry.
And that brings us to today's subject on pool startup issues. A lot of pool techs will be doing startups or be asked to do startups by the builder. Builders are pretty busy right now. You probably know this, but since COVID-19, the pool building industry has just skyrocketed or exploded, however you want to say it. Like, for instance, here in California, one of the biggest builders is Blue Haven Pools, and they're about 300 pools out right now as far as build.
Wow.
So I think if you get a bid today, you're like 9 or 10 months away from them breaking ground. And with that said, startups are extremely important for the pool to turn out right. And currently there are 3 methods right now. There's the barrel startup, there's a traditional startup, and there's a hot startup or acid startup. So in your opinion, which is the best method to start a pool?
Well, first of all, I think there's a couple of more startups in there that you could add to that. There might be 5 startups, but
okay,
or maybe 1 or 2 are a sub of the traditional ones. But I think there's the barrel startup. I think is probably for pools that have probably a low calcium, low alkalinity source water. Hot startups are pretty much for exposed aggregate type of finishes. And so that leaves us with traditional startup. And there's a few versions of traditional startup. But the barrel startup is a little bit difficult for people to get a hold of. There's actually 2 versions of the barrel startup. There is one that's been around for quite a while from On Balance. And they recommend actually putting calcium chloride in the barrel. I'm sorry, they recommend putting sodium bicarb in the barrel and running the water through the barrel to get alkalinity. And then the startup from Orenda also uses a barrel, and they put in calcium chloride. So they build the calcium level up in one case, they build the alkalinity up in the other case. The goal, of course, is to create enough calcium and enough alkalinity in the pool that you don't get plaster dust. Those are the two methods that are barrel startup. And pretty much, in my opinion, they're for people that have very low calcium and very low alkalinity water. If your water is, quote, normal, then you probably should stick with one of the traditional startups. And there are a couple of versions of it. Leslie's has a startup method. There is another startup method that is from the National Plasters Council, NPC startup. And then, believe it or not, yours truly has a startup method that we call the borate startup method.
I would have never guessed you had a startup method, Bob. You do everything, so yeah, of course you have a startup. Go ahead.
Of course I have a startup method. And believe it or not, the startup method is available to you for free at pcti.online. And then click on Tech Bulletins. And there is a 9-page startup that takes you through step by step what to do. Advantage is that it requires that you make a test every day on the water. And then based on those tests, it gives you a calculation to add each of the ingredients in each step so that you know exactly what to do. And when you're done, it gives you a written record of how the pool was started up. I developed that with the guy that at the time was the education chairman for the National Plasters Council. His name was Greg Garrett, and unfortunately about a year and a half ago he passed away. He and I worked on this startup method, and we put borate in on day one. There's a couple advantages to doing it, to adding the borate on day one. You can do the same startup without putting the borate in, and just skip that and go on with the rest of the startup, and it gives you a written record. Greg had asked me just before, not too long before he passed away, if I could make it into an app. And of course, yours truly has made 5 apps now. And so I made an app called the Borate Pool Startup. It's available for Apple and Android phones. It's $9.95, $9.99, and is a one-time purchase. And it goes through the exact same steps that are in the printed version, except it stores everything on your phone. And then you can download it to your computer if you want, so that you have a digital record of exactly what you did day by day, what the test results were and everything. It's a great way to have a permanent record. In any case, a traditional startup, the biggest thing there are 2 things to me that are super important. And the first one is to make a test on the incoming water. And you need to know what's in the incoming water, whether or not you've got low calcium, low alkalinity, if it's normal, if you've got high copper or iron. And these are really important to know about, because if you have a high copper and high iron, you need to make a decision about what to do about the metals, because the amount of metal that is allowed in potable drinking water is in excess of what can cause a stain in a pool. So, and particularly with new plaster is very subject to being stained. We don't want to stain it. So if you have metals that together, copper and iron, total more than 0.4 parts per million, total between the 2 of them. If it's more than that, then you need to add a sequestering agent, or you need to use a metal removing product. And there are 2 types of metal removing products. One is a pre-filter that you hook up to the hose, and it removes all the metals. It doesn't remove everything, it just removes metals. In my opinion, the best way to deal with metal in the water is to get rid of it. You can use a pre-filter and then the metal never gets in the pool. If, on the other hand, you get metal in the pool, you can use one of these devices that's either a bag or a little cage type thing that you put into the skimmer. These things take quite a while to remove the metal. And by quite a while, we're talking about maybe a week. And in the meantime, there's enough metal in the pool that it could cause some stains. You can use a sequestering agent, but please understand that a sequestering agent only surrounds the metal with a chemical that prevents the metal from attaching to anything that might cause a stain. The molecule, the chemical, is organic. And because it's organic, it degrades, it biodegrades and breaks down. And sunlight and chlorine make it break down. So if you put a sequestering agent in the water, the metal is still in the pool. And this is really important that you understand that, because eventually the sequestering agent will decompose. And when it does, the metal is free to cause a stain. So it's better to get the metal out of the pool. And you can use a sequestering agent along with the removal device that fits in the skimmer. So it does work in conjunction with that. So you can use it. But many startup guys, they're in a hurry. The last guy that's there fills the pool up, it gets filled, they dump a couple of bottles of sequestering agent in and think they're done. And that's just not the way to do it. You need to measure what's in the water and treat it on the way in, or at least know what's going to happen, so that when the water gets full in the pool, you can start to deal with it. What we want to do in every startup method, day one, we want to get calcium to 150 parts per million. And this is really an important step, because to balance the pool, to get a saturation index that is favorable or near zero, in order to calculate the saturation index, it's based on calcium saturation. And water is not saturated until we get 150 parts per million of calcium. So we need to get that in there on day one. So when you test your incoming water, if the water is less than 150 parts per million of calcium, when the pool is full, that's one of the first things you put in the pool is some calcium to get it up to 150.
Yeah, in California, we don't have that problem because our tap water is pretty high in calcium. But backing up a little bit, the bag you're mentioning in the little container is the Sea Leader product. And that's one of the things I was going to mention. And the next thing I had for you was the sequestering agents. That's one of the things that people are doing nowadays when they start up a pool, is throwing in, Jack's Magic or the Sea Leader sequestering agent. And then, like you said, part two of that is knowing if there's metal. Number one, knowing if there's metal ions in the pool water. You have to test for that. And then using the Sea Leader to pull it out of the water. And I've talked to them in length about their product. And it could be anywhere from 30 days to 60 days, actually, to pull that metal out of the water. It takes a long time sometimes, in some cases, depending on the flow. A lot of variable speed pumps don't move the water as much. So that is a highly effective product. So you're saying just putting a sequestering agent in the pool when you start it up is not enough?
It's definitely not enough. It's definitely not enough. The EPA allows up to 1.1 parts per million of copper in drinking water. And I just finished telling you that anything above 0.4 parts per million causes a stain.
Yeah.
So it's not that all water has 1 part per million of copper in it, but it's allowed to have up to 1.1. And so you could be getting almost 3 times the amount of copper that can cause a stain in your pool right out of the hose.
That's exactly right. And, Lamont has a new test kit also, the Color Q 2X Pro 9, which has the copper and iron test the photometer test on there. And I recommend if you're doing a startup, at the minimum, you should have that test kit. And maybe at the maximum, you should have the spin touch because that gives you just about everything so quickly.
Yeah, it's a time-saving thing. But again, the spin touch is $700 to $800. And then each of those discs is probably about $250 or $3.
Yeah,
So,
it's pretty expensive, but for a startup, I think it's worth it because you're charging for that anyway. So you're charging anywhere from $500 to $600 or $700 to start it up. So it pays for your app, of course, for $10, and it'll definitely pay for the spin touch disc. So it's not a big issue if you do a lot of them.
if it were me, I think what I would do, there are 3 companies that I'm aware of that make a pre-filter. And the company that makes the See You Later, they make a single and a double filter that you can just connect up a hose to. And the water on its way into the pool goes through that filter and it removes all of the metals, not just copper and iron, but everything else, aluminum and manganese and all the way down the line, even lead. So it takes everything out of the water and then you don't have to deal with it. And if I were doing a startup, if there was any metal at all coming in, I'd just be running the water through that filter, period. And if I were a startup guy, I would just include the cost of that in my startup. And you don't have to buy the housing every time. You have to buy the filters that go in it. I would include the cost of a couple of those filters, filter cartridges in every startup, and just use it on every startup. And everything's going into the pool is perfect.
Yeah,
You know,
that's a great idea. And if you do a lot of startups, I highly recommend investing in that pre-filter by See You Later. And again, you're going to pass the cost of it on to the customer anyway, so it shouldn't be a big deal using that. And to find other podcasts, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel here every Monday through Friday. I'll post a podcast episode. You can also go to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com, and I have over 1,700 podcasts there for you to download. You can listen to those at your leisure. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.